In Canada, most offenders are serving a fixed-length prison sentence. This means they will eventually be released back into the community once their sentence ends. Before this happens, most offenders will become eligible for and may receive parole. Ever wonder what the purpose of parole is, or how it contributes to public safety? Parole is a carefully constructed bridge between incarceration and return to the community. It is a type of conditional release and contributes to the protection of society by allowing some offenders to serve part of their sentence in the community under the supervision of a Correctional Service of Canada parole officer and subject to conditions. It does not reduce the original sentence imposed by the court, and offenders are not free to do as they please while on parole. Parole contributes to public safety by helping offenders gradually reintegrate into the community and adopt a law-abiding, pro-social lifestyle in a controlled and supportive environment before they are released from prison at the end of their sentence. The Parole Board of Canada, an independent administrative tribunal, is responsible for granting, denying, and revoking parole for offenders serving sentences of 2 years or more. The PBC also makes parole decisions for offenders serving sentences of less than 2 years in all provinces and territories, except Ontario and Quebec, which have their own parole boards. Parole decisions are made by PBC board members who, reflecting Canada's diversity, come from all walks of life in fields as diverse as criminology, law, policing, social work, medicine, education, business, and the private and public sector. PBC board members are thoroughly trained in risk assessment and decision-making. They make parole decisions through either an in-office file review or a face-to-face hearing with the offender and their parole officer. When making parole decisions, PBC board members consider all relevant available information related to the offender's risk to reoffend, whether that risk can be safely managed in the community, and whether the release of the offender will contribute to the protection of society by facilitating the offender's return to the community as a law-abiding citizen. The PBC's policies also respect gender, ethnic, cultural, and linguistic differences among offenders, the special needs of women and Indigenous peoples, and other groups with special requirements. For example, elder-assisted hearings provide a culturally responsive hearing process for First Nation, Métis, and Inuit offenders that allows board members to take into account the uniqueness of their Indigenous culture and heritage. All relevant available information is provided to PBC board members to consider in their decisions. Information comes from a variety of sources and can include information from the police, courts, victims, mental health professionals, and correctional authorities. When deciding on the conditional release of an offender, board members assess this information and conduct a thorough assessment of each offender's social and criminal history, the offender's understanding of their offense, any progress the offender has made or programs they've completed, their behavior in the institution and while on previous conditional releases, risk assessments, the offender's release plan, community supports, and any victim statements. All of this information is used to assess an offender's risk to reoffend, and the protection of society is always the paramount consideration. There are 4 types of conditional release: temporary absences, day parole, full parole, and statutory release. Temporary absences are usually approved or authorized for community service, family contact including parental responsibilities or personal development, and can be either escorted or unescorted. Day parole allows offenders to participate in community-based activities, gain employment, and participate in programs to prepare them for full parole or statutory release. Offenders on day parole must report to a CSC parole officer and reside at a community facility or halfway house. Full parole allows offenders to serve part of their sentence under supervision in the community. It fosters the gradual reintegration of offenders back into the community. Offenders on full parole must also report regularly to a CSC parole officer, however they typically live in a private residence. Offenders are eligible to be considered for release on full parole once they have served 1/3 of their sentence. All offenders released on parole must follow standard conditions, as well as any special conditions that the PBC feels are necessary to manage an offender's risk in the community. An example would be to abstain from the use of alcohol or drugs. If an offender breaches any of their conditions, their parole can be revoked and they can be returned to prison. Statutory release is not the same as parole, as it is not a PBC decision. It is a mandatory release by law after an offender has served 2/3 of their sentence. The PBC can, however, order that an offender be detained past their statutory release date in specific cases on the recommendation of the Correctional Service of Canada. Offenders on statutory release are also subject to release conditions. Under the law, victims have a role in the parole process. Victims have a right to certain information about the offender who harmed them. They can provide the PBC with information about the offence and its impact on them and request that conditions be imposed on an offender's parole. They can also attend and present a victim statement at parole hearings, receive parole decisions, and request audio recordings of parole hearings for which they did not attend. To promote public understanding of parole, as well as openness and accountability in its operations, anyone can apply to observe a Parole Board of Canada hearing, and all of its decisions are available upon written request. Evidence shows that the gradual, controlled, and supervised release of offenders is the most effective way of ensuring public safety. Over the past decade, 96% of offenders on parole have not committed a new offence, and 99% have not committed a new violent offence. Public safety is always the primary consideration in all Parole Board of Canada decisions. For more information, please visit Canada.ca/parole.